The quiet hum of the kitchen appliances filled the air, barely noticeable in the stillness of the room. A man stood there, his back to the window, gazing out at the sun-drenched landscape outside. He had always enjoyed moments like this, a peaceful break before diving back into the chaos of his mission. A soldier, he was accustomed to moments of calm, knowing that sooner or later, action would come rushing in. But today, something felt different. He couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. John was a man who had seen it all: wars, battles, near-death experiences. He was a veteran of countless missions, his eyes hardened by years of service. Today, though, he wasn't on a battlefield. Today, he was here, in this ordinary house, waiting for something that was supposed to be routine. But his gut told him that nothing about today was going to be routine. His task was simple: meet the new recruits, get them settled in, and leave. That was the plan. He expected a couple of grumpy aliens, perhaps an interrogation or some diplomatic nonsense, but nothing he couldn't handle. He had handled far worse. The sound of a door creaking open broke his thoughts. He turned around, still trying to shake off the sense of something lurking just beyond his awareness. There, standing in the doorway, were two figures, alien females. But these weren't just any aliens. They were different. Their presence alone sent a chill down John's spine. One of them had skin that shimmered like purple starlight, her eyes glowing an unnatural shade of violet. Her body was lean, athletic, yet undeniably feminine, dressed in a sleek, form-fitting suit that seemed almost liquid in texture. Her long hair flowed like silk, colored a deep, radiant purple, cascading down her shoulders like a waterfall of light. The second alien stood beside her, equally mesmerizing, her hair a vibrant green that seemed to shimmer with an almost supernatural glow. She, too, wore the same black, skin-tight outfit, her eyes glowing with an eerie intensity. John blinked, his eyes widening for a moment. His soldier instincts kicked in, but his brain was slow to catch up. These were no ordinary recruits. The alien women didn't just walk into the room, they glided, their movement smooth and unnaturally graceful, as if they were both at home in this world and not in it at the same time. They didn't speak at first, just watched him with an air of amusement. Their gaze was intense, but not hostile. Instead, it felt almost teasing. John stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The purple-haired alien stepped forward first. Her eyes never left his, and when she spoke, her voice was like velvet, smooth and laced with something he couldn't quite place. "You must be the human soldier they sent to babysit us," she said, her tone playful but with a hint of something darker beneath it. John straightened up, swallowing the unease rising in his throat. "I'm here to ensure your safety. And make sure you're settled in for your mission. You know, nothing too complicated." The green-haired alien tilted her head slightly, her eyes glimmering with curiosity. "You think we need protection?" she asked, a subtle smile curling at the corner of her lips. John hesitated, sensing the hidden meaning in her words. "Of course not. But it's my job to make sure you're, well, taken care of." The two women exchanged a glance, and for a moment, John felt like he was the subject of some silent conversation. A conversation that didn't involve him. The air between them thickened with a tension that was both confusing and exciting. It was like they were playing a game he didn't understand yet, and he had no choice but to follow along. The purple-haired alien leaned forward slightly, narrowing her eyes. "You're a soldier," she said, her voice now a low whisper, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "But do you really think you can handle us?" John's confidence faltered for a split second. The way she said it, it wasn't just a question. It was a challenge. And he wasn't sure if he was ready to accept it. He chuckled nervously, trying to cover up the sudden shift in his emotions. "I've handled worse. You're not the first aliens I've met." But the alien woman's smile only widened, her eyes flashing with an unreadable intensity. "We'll see about that, won't we?" Without another word, the two women moved past him, their presence so powerful that it seemed to shift the very air around them. John watched as they walked, their every movement a dance, as though they were perfectly synchronized with the universe itself. He felt an odd sense of discomfort, like a fly caught in a web, unable to escape but not entirely sure if he wanted to. He turned slowly, watching them take their place at the table, still quiet, still watching him with that same playful, teasing gaze. John stood there, trying to focus, trying to remind himself of his mission, but something in the air had shifted. Something he couldn't put into words. The confidence he'd once had, the control he thought he had over this situation, was slipping away. The aliens had no intention of making this easy. In fact, they hadn't even started yet. And in that moment, John realized something. This wasn't going to be the routine mission he had expected. These aliens were here to show him something, to test him. And he wasn't sure he was ready for whatever that might be. As he watched them, still smiling, still waiting, one thought echoed in his mind: he had no idea what he was walking into. The air in the kitchen was thick with an unusual energy. John stood motionless, trying to keep his composure, but his heart raced with each passing second. The alien women were now seated at the kitchen table, their gazes never leaving him. The tension in the room was palpable, like the calm before a storm. John took a slow breath, trying to steady himself. He had been in life-threatening situations before: combat zones, hostage rescues, war zones where every move could mean life or death. But this was different. There was no gunfire, no explosions, just two women who, despite their beauty, radiated a power that made his instincts scream. "You're staring," the green-haired alien said softly, her voice like honey, smooth and strangely intoxicating. It was a subtle command, yet it carried weight. John blinked, snapping out of his trance. His face flushed as he realized how obvious his staring had been. "Sorry," he muttered, glancing down at the counter, trying to regain some shred of control. "Don't be," she continued with a sly grin. "We're used to being admired." The purple-haired alien chuckled lightly, her eyes never leaving his. She leaned back in her chair, her body language exuding confidence and power. "You really don't know what you've walked into, do you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John swallowed hard. He had been briefed about their mission, about the alien strength and abilities, but no amount of preparation could have prepared him for this moment. Their confidence, no, their certainty, was almost overwhelming. It was as if they knew exactly what he was thinking, anticipating his every move. And for some reason, that unsettled him. He took a step forward, his soldier's instincts pushing him to take control of the situation. "I don't know what game you're playing," he said, trying to sound assertive, "but I'll play by your rules. Just tell me what you need." The green-haired alien raised an eyebrow, as if she hadn't expected him to respond so quickly. There was a flicker of amusement in her eyes, but also something darker. "Play by our rules?" she asked, her voice almost teasing. "Oh, you will. You'll be playing by our rules, but not in the way you think." John's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure what they meant, but he had the distinct feeling he was being toyed with. And that didn't sit well with him. He had always prided himself on being the one in control, the one who could manage any situation, no matter how strange or dangerous. But with these two, it felt like the tables had already turned before he even realized what was happening. "You think you can handle us?" the purple-haired one asked, her voice laced with an edge that made his stomach flip. "You're only human, after all." John clenched his jaw. He had been called weak before, but never by someone who seemed so sure of themselves. Never by someone whose presence could make him feel so small. "I've handled plenty of challenges," he replied, trying to sound confident, but there was a trace of doubt in his voice. He could feel it creeping up his spine, like a whisper in the back of his mind telling him he was in over his head. The green-haired alien stood up, gliding toward him with a movement so fluid it was almost hypnotic. She circled him, her gaze never leaving his. "Let's put that to the test, shall we?" she said, her voice soft, but with a definite challenge in it. John stiffened, his instincts screaming at him to stay alert. But he was caught off guard when she stopped directly behind him. Her hand brushed lightly against his shoulder, sending a shock of electricity down his spine. "You're not used to being in the presence of someone more powerful than you, "Are you?" she whispered in his ear. John didn't answer. He couldn't. The sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. His breath caught in his throat as her presence seemed to fill the room, the air heavy with an undeniable charge. The purple-haired alien, watching the exchange, leaned forward, a smile tugging at her lips. "He's not ready for this, is he?" she mused. "No matter how much he wants to believe he is." John's mind raced. What was happening? He was supposed to be in control, leading this operation, but here he was, caught between two aliens who seemed to toy with him like a cat with a mouse. Their power was undeniable, and for the first time in his career, he felt small. "I'm ready," he said, more to himself than to them, but the words felt hollow in the room. They both laughed softly, their voices like music, yet something more. There was no humor in their laughter, only the cold, knowing certainty that this was just the beginning. "Ready?" the purple-haired alien asked, standing to her feet. "You haven't even begun to understand what it means to be ready. But you will. Oh, you will." John looked at them both, realizing with a sinking feeling that this was no ordinary mission. This wasn't about strength or tactics. This wasn't about winning. It was about something deeper, something he hadn't been prepared for. The first encounter was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. And the hardest part? He didn't know if he was strong enough to face it. The air in the room was electric. John's heartbeat hammered in his chest as he tried to stay calm, but everything around him felt wrong, unnaturally still, like the calm before a storm. He had faced enemies before, but none had ever made him feel quite so powerless, so out of his element. The two alien women sat in front of him, casually leaning back in their chairs, their eyes locked onto him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Their confidence was overwhelming, their presence dominating the room. It was like they knew something he didn't, something he was supposed to know. And that thought alone made his stomach churn. "You're trying so hard to stay composed," the purple-haired alien said, her voice soft, almost mocking. "But you can't hide it. You're already in over your head." John clenched his fists, refusing to let his guard down. He wasn't about to let these aliens see his weakness. Not now, not ever. But something about their presence made it hard to hold on to that resolve. "You think you can control this situation?" the green-haired alien chimed in, her tone teasing. "But you're not in control here. Not anymore. And you'll learn that soon enough." John's jaw tightened. He had dealt with overwhelming odds before, but this felt different. There was something about these women that went beyond physical power. They had a pull, a magnetic force that made him feel drawn to them, even as he resisted. He took a step back, trying to gather himself. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through his mind. The purple-haired alien stood up slowly, her gaze never leaving his. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them, her presence almost suffocating. "What we want," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "is to see if you can handle what's coming. To see if you're truly as strong as you think you are." John tried to back away, but something in the air stopped him. It wasn't just her presence, it was a feeling, a sensation, like an invisible force holding him in place. "You don't have a choice in this," the green-haired alien added, her voice soft but firm. "You've already stepped into our world, and now, you'll have to play by our rules." John's breath hitched as the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He was no longer in control. These women were playing with him, testing him, and he didn't even understand the game. The purple-haired alien reached out, her hand brushing against his arm. Her touch was soft, but it burned like fire, sending a shock through his body. "You're a soldier. You fought on the front lines, and you think that's all it takes to be strong," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We'll see how you handle us. We'll see how you handle true strength." John's body tensed, his mind racing. He tried to push her away, but his body wouldn't obey. His muscles refused to move, as if they were paralyzed by her touch. "You're trying to fight it," she continued, "but the more you fight, the worse it will get for you. The harder we'll make it for you." He tried to snap out of it, but the words only deepened his confusion. What were they doing to him? What kind of power did they have? The green-haired alien stood up and walked toward him, her eyes glinting with something dark, something predatory. You still think you're in control, she said, almost pityingly. But you're not. You never were. John gritted his teeth, fighting the sense of helplessness clawing at him. I can handle anything you throw at me, he said, the words coming out with more confidence than he felt. The green-haired alien smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made his blood run cold. You haven't seen anything yet. Suddenly, the room seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, the weight of their presence suffocating. John could feel his vision starting to blur at the edges, as if something was clouding his mind, pulling his thoughts into a haze. What's happening? He asked, his voice shaky. The purple-haired alien's smile deepened, her eyes glowing brighter now. We're just getting started. This is where you learn the difference between human strength and true power. John's body felt like it was fighting itself, his muscles locking in place, as though his own body was betraying him. He was still aware of everything, still aware of their mocking smiles, of the way they moved so fluidly, like they were in complete control of the situation. But he felt paralyzed, as if he couldn't move a muscle, couldn't escape the grip of whatever power they had over him. You want to fight, the green-haired alien said, her voice lilting with amusement. Then fight. But no matter how hard he tried, John couldn't summon the strength to move. It wasn't just physical strength that he was missing, it was something deeper, something he couldn't even begin to understand. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying, the game had already been decided. He was not the one who got to choose how it played out. The aliens didn't need to do anything more. They didn't need to use force, because they already had him. They had broken him without a single punch being thrown. As the room around him began to spin, John understood the lesson they were teaching him. This wasn't just a test of strength. It was a test of his mind, his willpower, his ability to hold on when everything was slipping away. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he could pass it. John had fought in wars where the outcome was written in the blood of the fallen. He had faced death countless times, staring it down without flinching, but nothing had prepared him for this. His body still felt heavy, weighed down by something he couldn't explain, something that had left him unable to move or even think clearly. The alien women had him trapped, and they weren't even trying to hurt him, they were toying with him, unraveling his sense of self and turning his strength into weakness. It wasn't just that they were stronger, far stronger, it was the ease with which they bent him to their will. He had spent years training to be the best soldier, to be a master of control and tactics. And yet here he was, standing still in a room that felt both suffocating and alien, unable to escape their pull. This wasn't just physical strength. No, it was something deeper. You don't understand, do you? The purple-haired alien asked, her voice carrying the weight of something ancient, something she had known for far longer than he could comprehend. She stood in front of him, so close that he could feel the heat emanating from her skin, her eyes scanning him like a scientist examining a specimen. John swallowed, trying to gather his thoughts, but every attempt felt like swimming through thick mud. I understand enough, he muttered, though his voice sounded uncertain even to his own ears. The green-haired alien stepped forward, her pace slow, deliberate. Each step seemed to resonate through the air, vibrating with an almost hypnotic rhythm. She stopped just inches from him, looking up at him with those glowing, unnerving eyes. No, she said softly, shaking her head as if disappointed. You don't understand. You think this is about strength. You think this is about winning or losing. She reached up, gently brushing her fingers across his face, a touch so soft, so delicate, but it sent a jolt through his body. But you're wrong. You can't win against us, no matter how hard you try. The words echoed in John's mind. He had spent his entire life fighting to be the best, pushing himself past limits he once thought were impossible to overcome. He had built his identity on the idea of being stronger, faster, and smarter than anyone else. And yet, here he was, in the presence of two women who made him feel like a mere child, helpless and insignificant. What do you want from me? He finally asked, his voice cracking despite his attempts to sound strong. The question had been on his mind for what felt like hours, and now it spilled out like a desperate plea. The green-haired alien smiled, her lips curving upward in a way that was more amused than kind. "We want you to understand. To feel what it's like to be truly powerless. To realize that not everything can be controlled by force. You can't just muscle your way through everything." John's fists clenched, the frustration growing within him. He wanted to scream, to fight back, to prove that he was stronger than this. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make his body move the way he wanted it to. Every effort felt like swimming against a current too powerful to break. "Fight it all you want," the purple-haired alien said, almost casually, her voice dripping with the kind of amusement you might show a child trying to climb a mountain. "But you'll lose. You'll always lose. Because you're trying to fight something you can't even begin to understand." John's mind reeled. He had faced enemies with greater strength, greater numbers, but he had always found a way to win. Always. This was different. This wasn't a battle he could win with sheer force or military strategy. This was a battle of wills, and right now, he wasn't even sure what his will was anymore. "You're not here to fight us," the green-haired alien continued, her voice soft but with an undeniable authority. "You're here to learn, to understand what it means to be nothing more than a piece in a much larger game. A game you'll never control. You think you can control your destiny? Your strength?" The purple-haired alien stepped forward again, her smile widening as she circled him, her movements predatory and smooth. "But the truth is, you never had control. You just thought you did." John's mind was in chaos. Everything he had known, everything he had believed in, was crumbling before his eyes. These women were right. He had never been in control, not like he thought. They were playing a game with him, but they weren't playing by the rules he knew. And that realization hit him harder than any blow he had ever taken. "You've been trying to control us," the green-haired alien said, leaning closer. "But the truth is, you've always been the one controlled. And now, you'll learn the real meaning of power. You'll learn what it means to be truly helpless." Her words cut through him like a blade. John's mind screamed at him to fight, to break free of their hold, but he couldn't. It was like trying to break free of gravity itself. Every attempt to resist only made him feel more entangled, more trapped. "I'm not helpless," he muttered, more to himself than to them. But the words felt weak, as if even he didn't believe them anymore. The purple-haired alien stopped right in front of him, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that felt like it was reaching into his very soul. "You are, though. And once you accept that, you'll truly begin to understand." John's head was spinning. They were right. He had been so focused on control, on power, that he never considered the possibility that the world might be far more complicated than he realized. These aliens weren't just testing his physical strength, they were dismantling everything he believed about strength itself. And the most terrifying part? He wasn't sure he had the power to fight back against that. The room felt colder now, the weight of their words pressing down on him like a 1,000-pound stone. He had underestimated them, underestimated the unknown, and now he had to face the consequences of that mistake. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But it had changed in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he could win this one. John had always been the one to control the situation. He had lived his entire life believing that strength was the key to overcoming any obstacle, that sheer will and determination would see him through. But now, as he stood in the midst of this strange, alien world, all that confidence seemed fragile, like a house of cards in the wind. The women, these aliens, had shattered every illusion he had about power, and now he was left in the aftermath, questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. The purple-haired alien, who had been the most enigmatic of the two, was standing before him now, her eyes narrowed, studying him as though he were nothing more than an object to be examined. She wasn't looking at him with hostility or anger, no, that would have been easier to deal with. She was looking at him like he was a puzzle to be solved, a curiosity to be dissected. And that realization, that feeling of being nothing more than a specimen, made his skin crawl. "You think you've been tested," she said, her voice cool, as though she were speaking to a child. "But you haven't even begun to understand what it means to be tested." John's heart pounded in his chest, and he clenched his fists, trying to push back the growing sense of dread. He had been tested before, in countless battles, in life-and-death situations where every decision counted. This was different, though. This was psychological warfare, an emotional and mental game he wasn't prepared for. The green-haired alien walked slowly around him, her steps deliberate, as if she were savoring every moment of his discomfort. "You've been so focused on fighting, on controlling everything around you, that you've never stopped to think about what we're doing to you." She tilted her head, studying him like an artist looking at a blank canvas. "And now you'll learn what it really means to be controlled." John's breath hitched, his throat tightening with the realization that there was no escape. The walls around him seemed to close in, the air thicker, more oppressive. His mind raced for a solution, for a way to regain control, but it was as if the very air itself was conspiring against him. "You can't fight us," the purple-haired alien continued, her voice dripping with something akin to amusement. "You've tried. You're trying now. But you're starting to understand the truth." The truth. The truth that he had been weak. The truth that no matter how much he fought, no matter how hard he pushed himself, he wasn't strong enough. His muscles, his will, his entire existence had been based on the idea that he could overcome any obstacle with enough determination. But now, he was facing something that wasn't physical, it wasn't a battle he could win by brute force. It was a battle of the mind, of his very sense of self, and he didn't know if he was strong enough to win. John took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind. "What do you want from me?" he asked again, his voice strained, but there was a trace of defeat in it now, a recognition that maybe he wasn't in control anymore. "We don't want anything from you," the green-haired alien said, her voice soft, almost pitying. "We want you to understand. We want you to see the world as we see it." Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. What did they see that he didn't? What was it that they understood that he had failed to grasp? He had always been the one with the answers, the one who knew how to fight back, how to take control. But now, he was lost, swallowed whole by their presence, by their words, by the strange power they wielded over him. "You're nothing more than a pawn in a game you don't understand," the purple-haired alien said, her voice low, almost intimate. "You think you've been playing this game, but it's been playing you all along." John felt the weight of her words crash down on him. The feeling of helplessness, of being a piece on a chessboard, had never been so real. He had always thought he was the one making the moves, but now he realized that every move he made had been orchestrated by them from the very beginning. His actions, his responses, his defiance, it had all been part of their plan. And that terrified him. He tried to stand taller, to regain the sense of control he had once felt, but it was gone now. They had taken it from him, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the empty shell of the soldier he used to be. The realization stung, cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. The green-haired alien stopped in front of him, her eyes cold, yet there was a hint of something almost sympathetic in them. "You've been trying so hard to control everything," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But it's not about control. It's about surrender. The sooner you learn that, the sooner you'll understand your place in all of this." John's head spun. Surrender? That wasn't the answer. He had never surrendered to anyone or anything. He had fought, always fought, and that had been enough. But now, as the weight of their words settled into his bones, he realized that maybe, just maybe, fighting wasn't enough anymore. Maybe he had been fighting the wrong battle all along. "You're not the warrior you think you are," the purple-haired alien said, her voice low and almost sorrowful. "And now, you'll learn what it means to be something else." John took a shaky breath, his mind reeling. What did that even mean? Was he supposed to surrender? Was he supposed to let go of everything that had defined him? The green-haired alien gave him a final, lingering look before turning toward the door. "We'll leave you to think about that," she said. "And when you're ready, we'll see if you've learned your lesson." As the door clicked shut behind them, John stood there, utterly still, the weight of everything they had said sinking into him like a stone in his gut. He didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was painfully clear: he couldn't go back to who he was before. There was no turning back now. John stood alone in the stillness of the room, the echoes of the alien's words reverberating through his mind like an unrelenting drumbeat. The air around him felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the walls were closing in, pressing down on him from all sides. His body still felt like it was moving in slow motion, like the weight of everything he had learned, or rather, everything he had felt, was pulling him deeper into a place he hadn't expected to go. He had been through battlefields where every second was a fight for survival. He had fought for every inch of land, every shred of dignity, every breath. But this? This was something entirely different. It wasn't just a fight for control, it was a battle for his mind, for his understanding of everything he thought he knew about strength, power, and survival. The purple-haired alien's words kept coming back to him: "You've never had control. You just thought you did." Her voice rang in his ears, almost mocking, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake off the feeling that everything he believed in had been wrong. All the sacrifices, all the pain, all the victories, they had been meaningless if he didn't understand the deeper truth they were trying to teach him. The door creaked open, and the green-haired alien stepped back into the room, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She didn't look at him with the same playful, teasing expression as before. This time, her gaze was steady, almost expectant. "You're still trying to hold on to the pieces of yourself that no longer matter," she said, her voice soft but laced with something that felt almost like sympathy. "It's sad, really. You were so certain of who you were, so sure of your strength. And now, you're nothing more than a shadow of that man." John's throat tightened. He had always thought of himself as a soldier, a weapon. Strong, unbreakable, relentless. But now, as she spoke, it felt like everything he had ever believed about himself was being chipped away, piece by piece. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence between them was deafening. "You've been resisting because you think surrender is weakness," she continued, moving closer, her presence like a force of nature. "But it's not. It's freedom. The real power isn't in fighting against us. It's in letting go of the need to fight. To stop holding on to the illusion of control." John's heart pounded in his chest. Let go? He had never let go of anything. He had fought for everything he had: his position, his strength, his dignity. He had earned every victory through sweat and blood. But now, in the face of these beings, he was being forced to confront a truth he didn't want to accept: he had no power here. The purple-haired alien joined the green-haired one, and they stood together, almost like two sides of the same coin. Their presence was overwhelming, like gravity pulling him down, and the tension in the air made it hard for him to breathe. "You think strength is something you have," the purple-haired one said, her voice soft but biting. "But it's not. It's something you learn. And it's something you can unlearn. You're holding on to a false idea of power. It's an illusion." John's chest tightened, and he took a step back, his mind racing. "I've survived wars, battles, I've conquered enemies. I'm not weak," he muttered, more to himself than to them. The green-haired alien smiled, but it wasn't the playful, mocking smile from before. This one was different, softer, almost pitying. "You're right. You've survived. But surviving isn't living. And living isn't about control, John. It's about surrendering to the flow. Surrendering to the truth that you're not the one in charge. You never were." The words hit him like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. He took another step back, his mind screaming in defiance, trying to hold on to the last vestiges of the man he thought he was. "I don't believe you," he whispered, though his voice faltered, uncertain. "I can't." The purple-haired alien stepped forward, standing right in front of him now, her eyes glowing with a strange intensity. She placed a hand gently on his chest, right over his heart. He should have been repelled by the touch, should have pushed her away. But instead, he froze, as if her touch had paralyzed him. You can't fight the truth forever, she said softly, almost kindly. This isn't a battle you can win with strength. It's one you have to let go of. It's about letting go of the idea that you need to be in control. Only then will you understand what true strength is. John felt the weight of her words settle into him, deep into his bones. His breath came faster now, a wave of realization crashing over him like a flood. This wasn't about physical strength. This wasn't about surviving, or conquering, or winning. This was about something much deeper, about understanding his place in a world far bigger than himself. The purple-haired alien's gaze softened. The real lesson, John, is that the power you seek isn't in fighting. It's in surrendering, to yourself, to the world around you, to what you can't control. John stood there, his entire world shifting beneath him. His mind was racing, but his heart was beginning to understand. He had always thought strength was about resistance, about fighting the world until it bent to his will. But now, it was clear, true strength was about understanding his limitations, about knowing when to step back and accept the world as it was. The green-haired alien gave him one final, knowing look. You'll never be the same again, John. And that's a good thing. The room seemed to grow still, almost peaceful, as if the very air had shifted. John's chest was tight, his thoughts still spinning, but there was something new, a sense of clarity, an awareness that he couldn't explain. The battle was over, and he had lost. But in that loss, he had gained something else. Something far more valuable than control. For the first time, he realized that he didn't have to fight anymore. He didn't have to resist. He could let go, surrender, and find strength in the unknown. And somehow, that thought didn't terrify him. It was freeing. John stood at the edge of everything he had known, his mind and heart torn between the man he thought he was and the unsettling truths he had been forced to confront. The alien women had given him no easy answers, only questions that gnawed at him, turning his very identity into a puzzle he couldn't solve. But one thing was certain, he couldn't go back to who he was before. The battle he thought he was fighting was over, and in its place was something entirely new, something that frightened him more than any enemy he had ever faced. He stood alone in the empty room, still reeling from the mental and emotional onslaught. The aliens had left hours ago, their cryptic words hanging in the air like a fog he couldn't shake. He had never been more uncertain, more unsure of himself. Yet, despite the confusion, despite the aching sense of loss that threatened to consume him, there was something else, something he hadn't expected. There was peace. For the first time in his life, John felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He didn't have to fight to prove himself anymore. He didn't need to be the strongest, the fastest, the smartest. The pressure to always be in control, to dominate every situation, had melted away like ice under a warm sun. But as he stood there, absorbing the reality of what had just happened, a question lingered in the back of his mind: was it worth it? The alien women had given him the answers he didn't want to hear. They had stripped away the layers of his ego, revealing a man who had been living a lie. He had always thought his strength was enough to define him, to protect him, to carry him through. But now, in the wake of their departure, he was left with the undeniable truth that the strength he had so carefully cultivated was nothing more than a crutch, a false belief that had kept him from truly living. His muscles ached, not from physical strain, but from the weight of the transformation. His mind was racing, trying to process everything, the lessons, the realizations, the undeniable shift in his understanding of who he was. The things he thought he knew had all been turned on their head, and the weight of it felt like an anchor dragging him deeper into unknown waters. Suddenly, the door opened again, and there they were. The purple-haired alien and the green-haired one, standing in the doorway, watching him with unreadable expressions. For a moment, John's heart skipped a beat. He had thought they were gone, that he had been left to grapple with his new reality on his own. But here they were again, the very beings who had turned his life upside down. The green-haired alien was the first to speak, her voice calm and steady. "You've learned more than you realize, John. But there's still one thing you need to understand." John turned to face them, his chest tight, his breath shallow. "What more is there to learn?" he asked, his voice strained with the remnants of frustration and confusion. "You've already destroyed everything I thought I knew." The purple-haired alien smiled, a small, knowing smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We haven't destroyed anything, John. We've shown you the truth. Now, it's up to you to decide what you do with it." John's mind whirled, trying to grasp what she meant. "And what if I don't want this truth?" he asked, his voice shaking. "What if I want to go back to the way things were? Back to the soldier I was?" The green-haired alien stepped forward, her gaze softer now, but still piercing. "You can't go back," she said simply. "Once you've learned the truth, there's no unlearning it. You've seen the world through a different lens now. You've seen your place in the grand scheme of things. And once you see the truth, it changes everything." John's pulse quickened. Was that it? Was this the price of knowledge, the cost of seeing the world as it truly was? The fear of the unknown, the terror of losing control, the crushing realization that everything he had lived for was built on shaky ground. "You're asking me to accept all of this," he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and reluctant understanding. "To let go of everything I thought I was. To surrender everything." The purple-haired alien nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, her voice gentle yet unyielding. "But it's not about giving up, John. It's about growing. About embracing the world, not as you wish it were, but as it is. The price of underestimating the truth is far steeper than you can imagine. But now you know, and with that knowledge comes the chance to rebuild." John closed his eyes, letting the weight of her words settle over him. He had spent so much of his life trying to control everything, trying to fight for a place in a world that never really needed him to fight. All of his strength, all of his power, had been used to protect a fragile ego that had been shattered in a matter of days. But now, as the alien stood in front of him, offering him the chance to move forward, to rebuild from the ground up, he felt something stirring within him, a flicker of hope, maybe even understanding. It wasn't the kind of victory he had expected, but perhaps it was the victory he needed. "You'll never be the same," the green-haired alien said, her voice soft. "But that doesn't mean you can't be more. You have the power to change, to evolve, to rise above the limits you once imposed on yourself." John stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of their words hanging heavy in the air. It was true. He would never be the same. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a terrible thing. "You're right," he said finally, his voice steady but filled with new resolve. "I don't know what comes next. But I'm done fighting it. I'll embrace it." The purple-haired alien's eyes softened, and for the first time, John saw something other than calculation in them, something almost kind. "Then you've learned the most important lesson of all," she said. "That the strongest people are the ones who can let go and start anew." With that, the door closed behind them, leaving John alone. But this time, as the silence settled around him, he didn't feel lost. He felt free. The battle was over. And in its place was a new journey, one where he would finally be able to embrace who he truly was, not who he had forced himself to be. And as he stood there, he knew that whatever came next, he was ready.